The crystal chandeliers dripped light over a sea of glittering gowns and sharp black suits. Cameras flashed in rhythmic bursts, capturing the wealth and power gathered under one roof. At the center of it all stood Adrian Steele, the man who owned half the skyline and ruled the other half with a single raised brow. His voice rolled through the ballroom, smooth and commanding as he addressed the charity gala. And then, the microphone slipped from his hand. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Adrian staggered, his fingers clawing at the polished podium. His face had drained of all color, sweat beading along his jaw. "Sir," one of his assistants cried, rushing forward, but Adrian collapsed before anyone reached him. The music screeched to a stop. The clicking of champagne glasses went silent. Then chaos. Lila Hart hadn't meant to be here. She wasn't part of this world, didn't even own a dress without holes in it. She had slipped in through the kitchen an hour ago, trading quick smiles with dishwashers and keeping her head down. The smell of roasted duck and rich perfumes was intoxicating after weeks of living under a bridge. Now she stood frozen in the far corner, a paper plate of shrimp in her hand, watching the most powerful man in the city hit the marble floor. "Call the doctor. Make space. Somebody get a paramedic." People shouted but didn't move, their designer shoes glued to the floor, afraid to crease their perfect image. A medical team, already stationed for the high-profile event, rushed forward, crouching beside Adrian. Blood pressures crashing. One of them barked. "We need a transfusion fast." "He's AB negative." Lila's heart jolted. "AB negative? The rarest blood type." The lead medic looked up, scanning the crowd. "Does anyone here have AB negative?" "Anyone?" Silence. Murmurs. Shaking heads. A man in a silk tuxedo muttered, "Just call the hospital. Transfer him." "By the time we get there, he'll be gone," the medic snapped. The weight of the words sank in. Lila's hands were trembling before she even realized she was speaking. I'm AB negative." The medic's head whipped toward her. The crowd's gaze followed, sweeping over her thrift store jacket, worn sneakers, tangled hair. "Right." A board member sneered. "And I suppose your blood's clean, is it?" A laugh, cold and sharp, cut from somewhere in the crowd. "She's homeless. God knows what she's carrying." "She's his only chance," the medic interrupted. "If she's telling the truth." Lila's pulse hammered in her ears. She thought about walking away, letting this cold, untouchable man die on the floor. People like him didn't see people like her. But something in the way his hand twitched, weak, searching, rooted her to the spot. "I'm clean," she said, her voice steadying. "Test me if you have to. But do it now." They dragged her to a side room. White walls, bright lights, the faint tang of antiseptic. She sat in the narrow chair as a nurse pricked her finger. Within seconds, the result flashed green. A match. The transfusion was set up in record time. As the needle slid into her vein, Lila tried not to look at Adrian, lying pale and still on the gurney beside her. Even half-conscious, he radiated authority, his jaw cut sharp as a blade. Halfway through, his lashes fluttered. His eyes, stormy gray, piercing even now, found hers. "Who?" His voice was raw, like gravel. "Someone who doesn't want you to die," she said quietly. His gaze held hers for a long moment, as if memorizing her face, before the drugs pulled him back into darkness. When it was over, Lila slumped back, dizzy and cold. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped forward, Adrian's personal assistant, if she had to guess. He held an envelope thick with cash. "Mr. Steele thanks you for your contribution," the man said smoothly. "Take this, and please, for both your sake and his, disappear. No media. No stories. No trouble." Lila stared at the envelope, heat rising in her chest. She'd just given this man her blood, and they wanted to treat her like a problem to be erased. Slowly, she pushed the envelope back into his chest. "Keep it." "I didn't do this for money." The assistant's polite mask faltered for a fraction of a second. From the gurney, a low, hoarse voice cut through the tension. "Let her go." The room froze. Adrian was awake, his gaze fixed on Lila. His tone was soft, but it held the weight of a command that no one dared disobey. The assistant stepped aside. Lila rose to leave, her legs shaky, her chest tight. She had no reason to stay, no place in his world. Still, she glanced back once before the door closed behind her, and found Adrian still watching her, his gray eyes unreadable, as if he was already deciding she would not be so easily forgotten. Rain hammered the city in silver sheets the next morning, turning the streets into glistening rivers. Lila pulled her threadbare coat tighter, the transfusion bandage still on her arm, her body aching. She'd given away half her energy and all of her pride the night before, and still left with nothing but a gnawing sense of being used. She was sitting on the cold steps outside St. Bridget's shelter when the black Bentley slid to a stop in front of her. Two men in suits stepped out. "Miss Hart," one asked. Lila's instincts screamed to run. "Who's asking?" Without answering, they opened the rear door. Inside, Adrian Steele sat in the back seat, a navy suit sharp against his pale skin. He looked better than last night, but there was still a faint shadow under his eyes. "Get in," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. Inside the Bentley, the leather smelled faintly of cedar and money. Raindrops streaked the tinted windows. Lila sat stiffly, her damp coat dripping onto the pristine carpet. "I wanted to thank you," Adrian began. His voice was lower now, less icy than she'd expected. "What you did last night, I owe you my life." "You already tried to pay me for it," she said flatly. His eyes cut to hers, sharp, assessing. "That wasn't me. That was my assistant's poor judgment." Poor judgment is a polite way to say insult. Something flickered in his gaze, but he didn't argue. Instead, he reached for a slim folder beside him and slid it toward her. "A position," he said, "in my company's charity foundation. Clean pay. Housing included. You won't have to sleep on church steps again." Lila stared at the folder. Of course. To him, kindness meant signing a contract. "And what do you get out of this?" "Peace of mind," he said without hesitation. "Knowing the woman who saved my life isn't bleeding out in some alley." She almost laughed. "You don't know me, Mr. Steele. You just know my blood type." For the first time, something cracked in his perfect composure, a faint twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Then maybe I should fix that." The unexpected scene. Before she could answer, the Bentley slowed. Outside, they had pulled alongside one of Adrian's downtown properties, a glass tower so tall it vanished into the storm clouds. On the sidewalk, a man in a torn jacket was arguing with a security guard, the guard shoving him toward the street. "Trash isn't allowed here," the guard snarled. The man slipped, falling into a puddle. People passed without looking. Lila's jaw tightened. She threw the car door open, ignoring Adrian's startled wait. She strode to the guard. "Hey!" Her voice rang sharp over the rain. "Is this how you treat people here?" "Ma'am, this is private. You don't shove someone into the gutter just because they don't look like they belong in your marble palace," she snapped. Then she bent, helped the man up, and pressed a crumpled bill into his hand. "Get something warm to eat, okay?" The man's grateful eyes lingered on her before he disappeared into the rain. When she turned, Adrian was standing outside the Bentley, rain darkening his suit, his eyes fixed on her. "You don't like watching people get pushed around," he said quietly. "Maybe because I've been on the ground before." Their gazes locked, tension humming between them. Not the polite distance of benefactor and charity case, but something sharper, more dangerous. The bold refusal. Back inside the car, Lila shoved the job folder toward him. "I'm not for sale. Not for a paycheck. Not for an apartment. Not for a debt you think you owe me." "You'd rather freeze?" "I'd rather stand on my own 2 feet, even if they're standing in the rain." For a long moment, the only sound was the patter of water against the glass. Adrian's jaw worked once, as if he wasn't used to hearing no. Finally, he said, "You're the first person in years to refuse me, Miss Hart. I don't think I like it. And I'm not sure I care." A slow, dangerous smile tugged at his mouth. "That's why I'm not finished with you yet." The first time Adrian Steele appeared in Lila's world after she refused his offer, she told herself it was coincidence. It was a week later, in the crowded basement of St. Bridget's shelter, where volunteers handed out steaming bowls of soup. She was ladling broth into paper cups when the room went oddly quiet. Conversations dimmed. Spoons clinked awkwardly against bowls. She looked up. There he was, impossibly out of place among chipped tables and peeling walls, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than the shelter's monthly food budget. His presence sucked the air out of the room. "Mr. Steele," the shelter director stammered, rushing forward. "We weren't expecting." "I'm here to make a donation," Adrian said smoothly, handing over a thick envelope. His eyes, however, never left Lila. The confrontation. She set down the ladle, wiping her hands on her apron. "You followed me," she said when he approached. "I call it keeping my promises." "You promised to leave me alone." "I promised no such thing," he corrected. "I promised I wouldn't try to buy you. This isn't about buying." "Really? Showing up here in a three-piece suit with a wad of cash isn't buying?" He tilted his head, as if studying a puzzle. "I'm trying to understand you. You walk away from security, but hand it to strangers without blinking. Why?" "Because they need it. And I don't." There was something in his voice, low, almost raw, that made her hesitate. But she pushed it away. "You have an empire, Steele. You'll be fine without me." An unexpected glimpse. That should have ended it. But instead of leaving, Adrian stayed. He rolled up the cuffs of his pristine white shirt and served food alongside the volunteers. The image was almost absurd. Adrian Steele, who had gala menus planned 6 months in advance, scooping mashed potatoes from a battered metal tray. And yet, he did it without complaint. When a shy little boy at the back of the line dropped his bread roll, Adrian knelt to pick it up, his voice soft as he asked if the boy wanted another. Lila caught herself watching him too long. She hated it. The clash. After the lunch rush, she found him leaning against the wall outside, lighting a cigarette. Rain slicked the pavement, blurring the neon lights of the liquor store across the street. "You can stop now," she said. "You've done your good deed for the day. Do you really think this is about image?" He exhaled smoke into the cold air. "If it was, there would be photographers. You still don't belong here." He took a step closer, close enough that she could smell the faint, clean bite of his cologne under the cigarette smoke. "Maybe not, but I've been somewhere worse." For a moment, his gaze went far away, shadowed. People think being at the top makes you untouchable. They forget how many knives are waiting at your back. The edge in his tone was so sharp, she almost asked him what he meant. But then his phone rang, breaking the moment. The shift. He didn't answer immediately, just kept his eyes on her as the device vibrated in his hand. "You think you've got me figured out," he said finally. "But you haven't even begun." Then he turned, sliding into the back of a waiting car. The taillights bled red into the rain as he drove away. 2 days later. Lila thought that was it. But 2 nights later, she was playing her battered guitar at the subway station. A small circle of commuters gathered to listen. She was halfway through a song when a new shadow fell across her. She looked up, straight into those gray eyes. Without a word, Adrian dropped a folded piece of paper into her guitar case and walked away. She finished the song with her heart pounding. When she opened the paper, it wasn't money. It was an invitation to a private event at the Steele Corporation headquarters. And scrawled at the bottom, in his own sharp handwriting, "You saved my life. Now it's time I changed yours. CL." The Steele Corporation headquarters glittered like a fortress of glass and steel, each window catching the city lights and throwing them back in sharp fragments. Lila stood in the marble lobby, clutching the invitation Adrian had given her. She felt the stares, employees in press suits eyeing her thrift store jacket like it was a weapon. She refused to shrink. The elevator doors slid open to the top floor. Adrian was waiting. "You came," he said simply, his gaze sweeping over her like a slow current. He was dressed in black tonight, the sharp lines of his suit softened only by the faint smirk at the corner of his mouth. "You make it sound like I had a choice," she said. "You always have a choice, Lila. You just keep making the ones that bring you back to me. The private event. He led her into a sleek, dimly lit lounge that overlooked the city skyline. Only a handful of people were present: board members, a few high-profile investors, and one striking woman in a red silk dress who seemed to take up more space than the room allowed. "This is Vanessa," Adrian said, his tone unreadable. "A business associate." Vanessa's smile was polite, but her eyes sliced sharp. "So you're the girl with the miracle blood. You've been quite the topic lately." Lila met her gaze, without flinching. "Glad I could be a conversation starter." Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Be careful. This world has a way of eating up conversation starters." The whisper. As the evening unfolded, Lila stayed at the edges, watching Adrian navigate the crowd, polite, controlled, untouchable. But when Vanessa leaned close to a silver-haired man near the bar, Lila's ears caught something that made her pulse stumble. "The dosage wasn't enough last time," Vanessa murmured, her voice low. "Next time, we make sure he doesn't get back up." The man nodded. "And the will?" "Already set. When he's gone, the shares are mine." The words hit Lila like ice water. Her throat tightened. The choice. She could leave, walk out, and pretend she hadn't heard. She owed Adrian nothing. But the image of him collapsing at the gala, pale and gasping, burned into her memory. And the fact that he had been poisoned, that someone was planning to finish the job. She turned, only to find Adrian standing just a few feet behind her. His gaze was locked on her face, searching. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "Not here," she whispered. "The truth comes out." Minutes later, they stood in his private office, the city spread out below like a web of fire. "You're going to think I'm crazy," she began. "Try me." "I heard Vanessa. She was talking to one of your board members. About finishing what they started at the gala. About your will." "Adrian," she swallowed. "You were poisoned." For a long moment he didn't move. Then he stepped closer, his jaw tightening. "I already knew," he said. The words stunned her. "You knew? And you're still alive." He gave a humorless laugh. "Barely. But the moment I show weakness, this company becomes theirs. And I won't give them that." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because trust is a currency I can't afford." His eyes locked on hers. "Except maybe with you." The crack in the armor. It was the first time she'd seen him look anything but in control. There was something raw in his expression. A man used to being hunted, too proud to run. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you've already saved me once without asking for anything. Because you're not afraid to walk away from me." Her pulse thudded in her ears. For a moment, the office felt too small, the city too far away. The rain outside lashed against the glass walls of Adrian Blackwell's penthouse, each drop a drumbeat echoing the chaos in Elena's chest. She stood in the middle of the living room, still in the oversized sweater he had given her last night, its warmth a sharp contrast to the cold reality gnawing at her. Across from her, Adrian stood tall in a crisp charcoal suit, his broad shoulders tense, his storm-gray eyes locked on her as if searching for an answer she didn't even know she had. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was low, too calm, too controlled. It was the kind of calm that made the air itself feel dangerous. Elena swallowed hard. "Because it wasn't your problem." The words hung there, foolish and fragile. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Not my problem?" He took a step forward, his presence so overpowering that she instinctively took one back. "Elena, someone broke into my hospital suite while I was unconscious. They were looking for you. My security traced them to a man who I owe money to," she finished, voice sharp but trembling. "A lot of money. I was supposed to pay him back weeks ago, but then her gaze faltered. Then you collapsed and you gave me your blood." His tone softened, but only for a heartbeat. "And now you're in danger because of it." She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "I was already in danger, Adrian. That's the thing about people like me. You can't save us. We're already too far gone." Something in his eyes darkened. Not anger, but a kind of pain she didn't understand. "You think I don't know what it's like to be too far gone?" Before she could answer, he stepped closer, close enough for her to smell the faint trace of cedar and rain on his suit. The difference is, Elena, I fought my way back. And now I'm not letting you drown. Her heart pounded, her instinct screaming at her to run. But before she could, his phone rang, a shrill, urgent sound that shattered the fragile air between them. Adrian answered, his voice clipped. What? A pause. When? The change in his expression chilled her. His posture stiffened, his jaw locked, and when his gaze returned to her, it was sharper than glass. They've taken someone, he said. Her stomach dropped. Who? An elderly woman named Rosa. She's listed as your emergency contact. Elena's knees nearly buckled. No. No. Rosa wasn't blood, but she was the only family Elena had, the one person who'd ever treated her like she mattered. They're using her to get to you, Adrian said, already grabbing his coat. You're coming with me. She shook her head, panic rising like a tide. Adrian, you don't understand. If I show up, they'll kill her. Then I'll go with you, he cut in, his voice a promise and a threat all at once. You think I'm going to stand by while they hurt you? While they take what's yours? His certainty terrified her almost as much as the situation itself. But there was no time to argue. Minutes later, they were in his black Maserati, the city's neon lights blurring past as he drove like the night itself was chasing them. The air between them crackled, not with romance, but with raw, unfiltered fear. Elena, he said without looking away from the road, when we get there, you do exactly what I say. No questions, no hesitation. She wanted to ask why he was risking himself for her, why a man like him, rich, powerful, untouchable, would step into the shadows of her broken world. But all she could do was nod, her voice trapped somewhere between her heart and her throat. When they finally pulled up to the derelict warehouse on the outskirts of the city, the rain had turned into a steady downpour. Shadows moved inside. Adrian cut the engine and turned to her, his eyes fierce. Stay behind me, no matter what. They stepped out into the rain. Every sound, water dripping from the roof, the distant hum of traffic, felt magnified. Inside, the air reeked of damp concrete and cigarette smoke. Rosa was tied to a chair, her hands trembling, her eyes wide with fear. A man in a leather jacket stood behind her, a cruel smirk twisting his face. Well, the man drawled. The girl who thinks she can run from her debts. His gaze slid to Adrian, and his smile faltered. And who the hell are you? Adrian's voice was calm, deadly. The man who's about to make you regret breathing. The man laughed, until Adrian moved. It happened so fast Elena barely saw it. One moment Adrian was standing still, the next, the man was on the ground, groaning, his knife skittering away across the concrete. Adrian freed Rosa in seconds, his large hand steady on the elderly woman's shoulder. You're safe now, he murmured. But as they turned to leave, a gun cocked behind them. Elena froze. The man in the leather jacket was back on his feet, a pistol aimed straight at her. You're not walking out of here, he snarled. Not unless you. The shot rang out before he could finish. And Elena gasped, not because the man had fallen, but because Adrian was the one who staggered back, blood blooming on his shoulder. The rain outside lashed against the glass walls of Adrian Blackwell's penthouse, each drop a drumbeat echoing the chaos in Elena's chest. She stood in the middle of the living room, still in the oversized sweater he had given her last night, its warmth a sharp contrast to the cold reality gnawing at her. Across from her, Adrian stood tall in a crisp charcoal suit, his broad shoulders tense, his storm-gray eyes locked on her as if searching for an answer she didn't even know she had. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was low, too calm, too controlled. It was the kind of calm that made the air itself feel dangerous. Elena swallowed hard. Because it wasn't your problem. The words hung there, foolish and fragile. Adrian's jaw tightened. Not my problem? He took a step forward, his presence so overpowering that she instinctively took one back. Elena, someone broke into my hospital suite while I was unconscious. They were looking for you. My security traced them to a man who I owe money to, she finished, voice sharp but trembling. A lot of money. I was supposed to pay him back weeks ago, but then her gaze faltered. Then you collapsed and you gave me your blood. His tone softened, but only for a heartbeat. And now you're in danger because of it. She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. I was already in danger, Adrian. That's the thing about people like me. You can't save us. We're already too far gone. Something in his eyes darkened. Not anger, but a kind of pain she didn't understand. You think I don't know what it's like to be too far gone? Before she could answer, he stepped closer, close enough for her to smell the faint trace of cedar and rain on his suit. The difference is, Elena, I fought my way back. And now I'm not letting you drown. Her heart pounded, her instinct screaming at her to run. But before she could, his phone rang, a shrill, urgent sound that shattered the fragile air between them. Adrian answered, his voice clipped. What? A pause. When? The change in his expression chilled her. His posture stiffened, his jaw locked, and when his gaze returned to her, it was sharper than glass. They've taken someone, he said. Her stomach dropped. Who? An elderly woman named Rosa. She's listed as your emergency contact. Elena's knees nearly buckled. No. No. Rosa wasn't blood, but she was the only family Elena had, the one person who'd ever treated her like she mattered. They're using her to get to you, Adrian said, already grabbing his coat. You're coming with me. She shook her head, panic rising like a tide. Adrian, you don't understand. If I show up, they'll kill her. Then I'll go with you, he cut in, his voice a promise and a threat all at once. You think I'm going to stand by while they hurt you? While they take what's yours? His certainty terrified her almost as much as the situation itself. But there was no time to argue. Minutes later, they were in his black Maserati, the city's neon lights blurring past as he drove like the night itself was chasing them. The air between them crackled, not with romance, but with raw, unfiltered fear. Elena, he said without looking away from the road, when we get there, you do exactly what I say. No questions, no hesitation. She wanted to ask why he was risking himself for her, why a man like him, rich, powerful, untouchable, would step into the shadows of her broken world. But all she could do was nod, her voice trapped somewhere between her heart and her throat. When they finally pulled up to the derelict warehouse on the outskirts of the city, the rain had turned into a steady downpour. Shadows moved inside. Adrian cut the engine and turned to her, his eyes fierce. Stay behind me, no matter what. They stepped out into the rain. Every sound, water dripping from the roof, the distant hum of traffic, felt magnified. Inside, the air reeked of damp concrete and cigarette smoke. Rosa was tied to a chair, her hands trembling, her eyes wide with fear. A man in a leather jacket stood behind her, a cruel smirk twisting his face. Well, the man drawled. The girl who thinks she can run from her debts. His gaze slid to Adrian, and his smile faltered. And who the hell are you? Adrian's voice was calm, deadly. The man who's about to make you regret breathing. The man laughed, until Adrian moved. It happened so fast Elena barely saw it. One moment Adrian was standing still, the next, the man was on the ground, groaning, his knife skittering away across the concrete. Adrian freed Rosa in seconds, his large hand steady on the elderly woman's shoulder. You're safe now, he murmured. But as they turned to leave, a gun cocked behind them. Elena froze. The man in the leather jacket was back on his feet, a pistol aimed straight at her. You're not walking out of here, he snarled. Not unless you. The shot rang out before he could finish. And Elena gasped, not because the man had fallen, but because Adrian was the one who staggered back, blood blooming on his shoulder. The rain had stopped, but the city still smelled of steel and storm. From the 50th floor, the glass walls framed a skyline washed in silver light. Inside, The air was heavier than the clouds outside. Ayla stood near the door of Adrian Voss's private office, clutching the hem of her coat, as if it might hold her together. Her reflection in the glass looked small, almost ghost-like, but her heart was pounding loud enough to drown out the hum of the air vents. "You read it, didn't you?" Adrian's voice was calm. Too calm, the kind of calm that meant danger. He was standing behind his desk, hands braced on the polished wood, eyes fixed on her as if nothing else in the world existed. Her fingers tightened on the folded document in her hands. "You had no right to do this." "No right?" His gaze sharpened, steel meeting fire. "You saved my life, Ayla. You think I'm going to just let you walk away back to the streets?"
"No."
"You're staying. And this," he nodded toward the contract. "Make sure of it." She unfolded the paper again, the words blurring. Full-time personal liaison to the CEO, indefinite term, accommodations provided, non-disclosure clause, penalty for breach. "It's a cage, Adrian," she whispered. "With gold bars, maybe, but still a cage." He came around the desk, slow, deliberate. His presence seemed to pull the air with him. "It's protection. You think the people who tried to kill me won't come after you? They know your face now. Your blood saved me. Do you understand what that means? To them, you're leverage." Her throat tightened. "So, this isn't about gratitude. It's about survival," he said, but his voice had softened, almost pleading. "And yes, it's about not being able to stand the thought of you vanishing from my sight." The words hit her harder than she expected. For a second, she let herself remember the night in the hospital, his pale, dying face, the desperate decision to give her blood. The way his eyes had opened afterward, locking onto her like she was the only anchor left in a collapsing world. She tore her gaze away. "You don't own me. Then don't make me your enemy," he replied, quiet but razor-sharp. Silence stretched between them, thick as smoke. Somewhere far below, the city roared with life, but up here, it was just them and the contract that could either bind them or break them. Ayla's pulse pounded in her ears. She should say no, walk out. But there was something else, something she hadn't wanted to admit. She didn't feel entirely safe anywhere else anymore. Finally, she set the paper down on his desk. "If I sign this, I have conditions." One dark brow arched. "Conditions?" She met his gaze steadily. "I'm not your servant. I'm not your possession. And if you ever try to control me beyond what's in here," she tapped the contract, "I walk. No penalty." Adrian studied her for a long moment, as if weighing whether her defiance infuriated or intrigued him. Slowly, the corner of his mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're bold for someone who was sleeping under a bridge 3 weeks ago. And you're arrogant for someone who almost died," she shot back. The tension broke, just slightly. He reached for a pen, clicked it once, and held it out to her. "Then let's seal it. On your terms." Her hand shook as she took it, the weight of the moment settling over her. The scratch of ink on paper was deafening in the silence. When she set the pen down, Adrian leaned closer, his voice low enough to make her shiver. "Now you're mine, Ayla. Not because of this paper, but because I won't let you be anything else." Her heart stuttered. She didn't know whether to run or fall. Outside, lightning flickered far in the distance. Inside, the storm had only just begun. The rain hit the city in sheets, turning the glass walls of the Langston Tower into mirrors of silver and shadow. Inside, the boardroom was suffocatingly warm, filled with murmurs, expensive cologne, and the quiet scrape of pens on paper. Elena stood at the far end of the room, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She didn't belong here, not among men in tailored suits, not in this temple of wealth. But she stood anyway, her gaze fixed on Adrian. He was at the head of the table, flanked by his advisors, his skin still pale from the weeks he had hovered between life and death. Every motion he made, every shift of his pen, every flicker of his eyes, was calculated, controlled. But when his gaze brushed hers, the control wavered. And for a second, she saw the man in the hospital bed again, the one who had whispered her name when he shouldn't have even known it. "Let's vote," one of the board members announced, snapping the spell. whether Mr. Langston retains his position as CEO or steps down for health reasons. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Elena's pulse pounded in her ears. She wasn't supposed to be part of this meeting. She wasn't supposed to speak. But the moment the smug smile of Victor Langston, Adrian's cousin, spread across the table, she knew silence wasn't an option. She stepped forward. "This is a setup," she said, her voice ringing clear over the hum of expensive air conditioning. "And you all know it." Heads turned. Some faces flickered with surprise, others with irritation. Victor's smile widened. "And you are?" "Elena." She met his gaze, unflinching. "The reason Adrian Langston is alive right now." A murmur rippled through the room. Victor scoffed. "We all heard the story. Some homeless girl happened to have a rare blood type. Lucky coincidence. Nothing more." She took another step, her voice like a blade. "Luck doesn't keep someone alive through the night when every machine says he's fading. Luck doesn't make a dying man open his eyes when doctors have given up. That wasn't luck. That was me." Adrian's fingers curled on the table, his knuckles whitening. Victor's smirk faltered, but he recovered quickly. "Be that as it may, this is a business matter. And he gestured dismissively at her, is not qualified to weigh in." "That's where you're wrong," Adrian said suddenly, his voice low but carrying an authority that made the entire board still. Every head turned to him. "She's more qualified than any of you. While you were circling like vultures, Elena was keeping me alive. She didn't ask for payment. She didn't try to take anything. She gave." His voice broke slightly, but he forced it steady. "She gave without expecting to get anything in return. Which is more than I can say for most of you." The silence was heavy, almost dangerous. Victor's eyes narrowed. "Are you saying she has influence over company decisions?" "I'm saying," Adrian replied, rising to his feet with deliberate slowness, "that anyone who thinks they can push me out while I'm still breathing will have to go through her first." Gasps. Whispers. Elena's breath caught, not just from his words but from the way he was looking at her. Like she was no longer the girl he'd met by accident, but the axis his entire world now turned on. The vote was postponed. By the time the meeting broke, rain still lashed the windows, but Adrian didn't let her walk out alone. He caught her hand in the hallway, pulling her into a quiet alcove where city lights spilled like shattered gold through the glass. "You didn't have to do that," he said, his voice low, almost raw. "I couldn't just watch them take what's yours." His gaze searched hers, lingering like a man trying to memorize every detail. "Elena, you're in danger now. Speaking out like that puts a target on you." She lifted her chin. "I've lived my whole life with a target. At least now, I have something worth standing in front of." For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The rain was a curtain around them, the city a blurred painting beyond it. Then his hand brushed her cheek, tentative but electric. "Why?" he asked softly. "Why risk yourself for me?" Her throat tightened. "Because you're the first person who's ever looked at me and seen more than nothing." His breath caught, and before she could step back, he leaned closer. His lips were a whisper from hers when a shadow moved in the glass. Adrian stiffened. He turned just as a sharp crack echoed down the hallway, a gunshot, muffled but close. "Get behind me," he said, his voice deadly calm. Elena's heart pounded. Somewhere in the distance, footsteps echoed, quick and purposeful. And then a voice, cold, familiar, cut through the air. "Step away from her, Adrian. She's not worth dying for." Victor.